Hey guys, welcome to today's video. I found a new library called Astro. So as the headline in this website suggests, it's a great framework or a library as I would call it for building content-driven websites. Or in shorter words, it's good for building statically generated websites. If you don't know what it means, it essentially means that Astro is really suitable for building blogs. So now that we know what Astro is, let's get started. Okay, so now since I have my project open, one thing I want to let you know is that to ensure a reproducible environment, I resorted to using dev containers. One customization to keep in mind is that the Astro team recommends this certain extension. So the Astro extension, because Astro has kind of its own programming language, and to support the programming language, we needed extension. Anyways, let's go back to the terminal. So first of all, we have to install Astro. To install Astro, I can simply go npm create Astro at latest and then enter. I'll choose yes, and then it will ask us a series of questions. This animation looks really nice, to be honest. To create a new project, let's call it Astro tutorial. I would like a helpful basic starter project. Yes. Install dependencies. Yes, I need a git repo. Then let's move on. It looks very nice, by the way. Now that Astro has been built, I'll navigate to the Astro tutorial folder and then npm run dev. This is done to run the dev server. Okay, so if I go to localhost 4321, I expect my browser to show up. However, as you can see, since we're running it in a dev container, in some cases, it just doesn't render to the browser. So there's a fix for this. To fix it, I go to Astro and then I go to astro.config.mjs. Here I have to change a couple of properties. First off, I have to add a server, and then here I have to add a host. So this will be the local IP address. So 127.0.0.1. Then I have to change my port as well, but I'll just set it to the same port, 4321. Now I expect it to run properly. Nice. As you can see, our code works. Let's now talk about Astro's folder or project structure. So most of our code is going to lie within the src or the source directory. So the layouts, as the name suggests, it's for layouts, pages. So if you've used Next.js before, all of our roots or our endpoints, as I would call it, would go here. So for example, the index directory navigates to the index.astro file, or let's say I create a hello.astro, so the /hello endpoint will render the hello.astro page. Furthermore, components is for your reusable components that you will use within your pages, and assets are for assets. So let's now try creating a small Astro page. So as stated before, I created an hello.astro file. So Astro is basically just HTML. And it's basically really simple. So I create layout and then I have to import layout as well, and maybe an h1 here and there. So hello world. We can add a paragraph if we want. This is a text from my page. Since it's running, now let's navigate to the browser and see if it works. So if I go to localhost 4321/hello, I expect my page to be rendered. Nice. Let's now move on. Similarly, just like Next.js, if you want nested routers, you can create a folder within a file. So for example, let's say I add games, and within games I can add another file called index.astro. Just like Next.js, once again, here I can import layout and create an h1 hello from the games directory. So I expect that if I go to the games directory, I expect my component to be rendered. So instead of hello, I do write games. We can even do dynamic routing. So for example, here I can do id.astro. So this is for dynamic URLs. So in the sense that if a user goes to /games/1 or /games/ whatever number, I expect this component to be rendered. So once again, I import my layout and then h1 specific game info. So for example, now if I go to games, I have an error that we can fix later on in this video. One more thing it's very important to mention is that Astro not only accepts .astro files, but it can also accept Markdown, HTML, or JS files. As an example, let's create a Markdown file. So within pages, I create a new file. Let's call it demo markdown.md. So here things are a little bit different. First, I have to specify my layout. To do so, I have to put in 3 dashes, 1, 2, 3, followed by another 3 dashes, so 1, 2, 3. Within these dashes, I specify my layout, so dot slash, and basically where my layouts are being stored. Layouts slash layout dot astro. And then if we want, we can even add our author. Maybe if this works, I'm not sure, but we can add the title as well. So let's say the greatest post of all time. So as a markdown file, I'll just do hello all. This is a file built with markdown. Let's save and then go back to our browser. So here instead of games, I do demo underscore markdown. Everything works as expected. Let's now move on. Let's now cover components. So if you come from a React background or any other web development background, you should know the components are reusable files that you can use within your pages. So here I can basically make another component. I'll call it demo component.astro, and just like all Astro files, these are just HTML files. So here I can just do an image src and then my image. I found a suitable image here, so an image from Wikipedia, and then I save. If we want, we can also add a div, basically wrap it around div tags, and then let's now try using this. So I go back to index.astro, or let's just use it in games/index. So demo component and then render it. Let's now test this out. If I go to games, whoops, so it doesn't work fine. This is because I made an error here. My URL of the image was wrong. So let me fix it. So within demo component, I go back here and this should be the correct URL. Refreshing it, now my image comes up. Let's move on. Since Astro is great for blogs, we can even fetch data from an API. So an example can be a developer or a blogger fetching data from a remote server, so like from a CMS, and then they can display all the data from their CMS onto their Astro page. So as an example, I've used the Switch Games API to demonstrate data fetching for Astro. I'll now show you how data fetching is done. So our first step is to actually fetch the data. So within these 3 dashed lines, I can create a variable called const switch games equals, and then this is how you fetch it. So I'll wait fetch and then the URL of my API. So basically this URL dot then, and then my response, and then I return it as response.json. So now that I have my switch games variable, I want to add type checking to this. So let's add a type. So type switch games type, and then so let's check out what the switch games type looks like. So basically, as you can see here, I should have an ID of type number and a name of type string. So this is the index page. So by this I mean the user should be presented with a list of games, and then when they click it, they will be taken to another page. So for now, I'll only be displaying the ID and the name. So anyways, now I want to use my switch games variable. So switch games dot map and then item. So I'm not having type safety. This is because I forgot to add it. So anyway, switch games type, and then it should be an array and a colon. So switch games type. I'll now close this window. Anyways, item, and then let's add a paragraph, and let's display the item dot name. Okay, so that should be it. If I go back to my browser, I expect all of my games to show up. Maybe we can also route the user or redirect the user to another endpoint. So what I would do here is I would wrap my element within a div, and then I'll do, in my paragraph, I can do ahref. So basically I want them to go to the games directory, so games slash, and then a dollar specified by item.id. Now I have to fix my code. So item slash a, and then add it here. Now I have to use backticks slash and then wrap it in curly braces. Let's go back. Now there are links. If I click on any of them, I get redirected to the games slash ID endpoint. Alternatively, what I can do is I can take all of this code and then turn it into a component. So here I'll create a new component. I'll call it game item.astro. So once again, I need 3 dashes. So my idea is I want an Astro component, and then I want to send the ID and the name props to that component. So this is how we send props to an Astro component. So basically const name and ID are the props that I need. Astro.props. So now that I have these props, I can just do div and then a paragraph. So ahref backticks and then slash games slash ID and then name. Let's now go back to index, and I can just change it very easily, like so, game item and then the name. So item.id and then whoops, the name, and the ID is item game.id. Let's go back games, and I expect everything to work just fine. Now I want styles in this project. This is where I'll use integrations. Specifically, I'll try to use the Tailwind integration. So this is really easy. Let's now add one. So I go to CD and then Astro tutorial. To add an integration, I can simply go npx Astro add Tailwind. Yes, I'd like to continue and then install my dependencies. Continue. I need to maximize the window. Yes, now it's done. So now my instructions are here. Basically, I go to a shared layout, so layout.astro. I go back up and import source styles global.css. Now since I'm importing them, I have to add them between this 3 dashed line. Okay, now that I have my global CSS, let's try adding some CSS. So within my component here, let's add a few classes. So class list. This is how we add classes within Astro. It has to be a curly bracket, rounded -md, comma, let's give it a background color, so bg slave 500, comma, I want my text to be white. Let's give it some margin and let's give it padding. Going back to my code, as you can see, now that I have some styles, it looks better than before, I must say. So let's say you want to stay within your comfort zone and use React instead. Astro allows this, but before creating a React component here, I have to add a React integration. So just like Tailwind, I have to just go npx Astro add React. So now it has to install my dependencies. Yes, and then yes once again. Cool. Let's now add a React component. So I'll basically duplicate the game item component via React code. So let's call it game item react.tsx. So just like before, I would need my props. Since this is TypeScript, I need an interface. So interface game item props. I have an ID. I have a name of type string. So now let's create a component. So export default function game item react is my component, and then my props. So ID comma name of type game item props, and then a return. Basically, I've already written the code. I'll just copy and paste it here. This is just standard React code, but the only difference is this time I've added a blue background color. Let's now try using it within our index file. So instead of game item, I will have game item react. It's now being imported and then I save. So in this case, I have an error this time. It's telling me to change my types. So I go here and change it to a lowercase n. Let's now go back and then refresh. So our code still works just fine. But now there's still one issue that we have to fix. This error. Let's now go back to fix it. So I go here to id.astro. So if we go back to our error log, it says that we need this function for our dynamic route. So let's implement this now. So now I need some JavaScript code. So within these 3 dashes, I do export const get static paths. It's some extra code. I have to remove this. So since my idea is to fetch a certain game within this endpoint, so first I have to fetch my games. So const switch games, and I can just copy the code from here. Copy and then paste. I need my switch games type. I need more types here, or I need more fields. So let's go back to our API documentation. So looking at my API here, we have a name, we have a genre, and then these other fields. So let's use it. So we have a genre of type string, but this is an array, comma, then we have developers, also of type string, but an array, and then release dates. But within release dates, we have multiple fields. Here, I'll just use Europe, which is of type string. So of course, I now have another error because I'm using the await function, and this is not async. So I just call it async. Okay, so now that I have switch games, I now want to find a switch game for the corresponding ID. To make this happen, what I'll do is return games.map, and then for each game I want to export a path, so params, and then so the ID is going to be the game.id. So what this means, what it will do is it will send a request to this URL, and with this corresponding ID, Astro will attempt to find the game with that ID. Okay, so now that I have the game, I just send it as props. That's it. Now I'll remove this. This code is unneeded. Okay, so now that I have the props, I have to get these props and then render them to the browser. So const and then game astro.props. Okay, so this means that from the props, I'm getting the corresponding game. Let's now display this. So I can have a title. So we have the game.name. And then within the paragraph, I can display the game.name. Within another paragraph, I can display the game developers, the genre, and the release date, release dates.europe. So going back to my browser, if I click on any of the game, I expect my information to return. Let's go back. So last but not least, we can even do something called on-demand dynamic routes. So this means that in this case, the routes are no longer pre-built. Okay, so to make this happen, we can create another folder and I'll call it authors. Within here, let's call id.astro. So once again, I'll call my layout and h1 of my ID. So within an on-demand dynamic route, I have to set my pre-render variable to false. Now, of course, I need to fix my code here. So fix my imports, import layout, and then I have to move this to the top. And then from the props, I get my ID. So astro.props. So if I go back /authors/1, we get an error here. So if you go back to the console, you can notice that earlier we had a warning that said that we need an adapter to be installed. So let's add an adapter for this type of routing. So for this example, in this video, I'll use the node adapter or the node integration. So cd astro tutorial, and then npx add, npx astro add node. Let's go yes, because now I have node. So if we go back to the console, we don't really have an output. It's because I made an error. It's not really a prop, but it's essentially a parameter. So I'll specify params. Going back to the code, now you can see without specifying a get static paths function, I now have an ID. So of course, if you're curious, Astro also has a multitude of adapters, but here we just use node. Last but not least, let's now learn about layouts. So if you don't know what layouts are, they're essentially components, but they provide you a reusable UI structure. So it's basically like a template. So let's create a layout. So here I'll call it a game layout.astro. So this means I'll be using my layout within my games directory. So let's create a simple layout. So of course, since it's an HTML file, doc type HTML, then end my HTML, and then head. So I can provide a title. Let's call list of games, and then let's specify body. Within the body, let's add a class. So class list. So I want to provide styles, Tailwind styles. So let's give it a background of black, text white, and some margin on the x-axis. So now that I have my layout, I need to also specify the children. So basically whatever I want to render. This will be denoted by the slot component. So let's now go back and use our game layout. So game Astro, for example, in index Astro, I can import my game layout, or I can just use it like so, game layout. Let's go to games. Okay, so now it's not being rendered and I know why. If I go to game layout.astro, I need to import my style. So here 3 dots, 3 dashes, or basically I have copied from layout.astro and then I'll paste it like so. Going back to the code and then refresh. Nice. Let's now apply the same thing to id.astro. Scrolling down, instead of layout, I just do game layout. If I click on a game, our styles are now applied. Alternatively, if we want, we can also add transitions to our page layout. How is that possible? So Astro provides a component called client router, which will import like so, and then we'll add client router at the end. But one thing to remember is that I couldn't really display page transitions on my Firefox browser. So I'll use a Chromium based browser to make this happen. So if I go to games and if I go back, now if I click on anything, notice that I have a small transition going on. If I scroll down, notice that I have this fade transition. Okay, so far it looks really nice. So that's it for today, guys. In this video, you got to learn how to use Astro and basically got to cover fundamental Astro topics. So you got to learn about components, integrations, layouts, and styles. Furthermore, you also learned how to do routing in Astro. That's it for today. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. Till then, bye bye.